Okay, you're live.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Today is June the 18th, and it is 10 a.m. And we are here today for the Las Cruces Economic Recovery Ad Hoc Board meeting. So we are going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Okay, so the next agenda item is a conflict of interest. I don't know if Francisco, do you know what we need to talk about on that exactly?
Mr. Chair, yes, this is Francisco Payares. For the record, you just need to call whether there's any conflict of interest with any items related on the agenda with any other persons in the meeting.
Thank you. Does anyone have any conflict of interest with any of the agenda items on the agenda this morning? As none, we will continue on to the acceptance of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
This is Debbie Moore. I move to accept.
Thank you, Ms. Debbie. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Michael. So I have a motion from Debbie and a second from Mr. Harris. Any discussion on the agenda as it's presented right now? As I see none and hear none, we're going to go ahead and accept the agenda as presented. Can I go ahead and get an aye from everyone if they accept the agenda as presented, please?
I accept.
Aye.
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 Okay. Any nays? Hearing none, the agenda is accepted as presented. I see that we don't have any minutes of approval for the previous meeting. So we're going to go ahead and go on to our discussion items, which we kind of narrowed down with the beginnings of this group at our last meeting, which was almost 2 weeks ago. So we did narrow these discussion items down, and I think we're going to continually bring in new discussion items as this group continues. So we're probably going to go into that and kind of just going. We have first up the New Mexico Safe Practices Promise, where is Mr. Paul?
I'm here.
Hello, Paul. It's going to present on. So once again, these are the 3 discussion items that we did talk about on the last meeting that we wanted to focus on with the small group that we had. So Paul, if you want to go ahead and talk to us about that, sir.
Sounds good. Well, I will go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Great. So good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Dahlgren. I'm the marketing director here at Las Cruces, and I'm here to talk to you today about the New Mexico Safe Promise. So let's jump right in. The New Mexico Safe Promise is an initiative open to all businesses and individuals in New Mexico who want to demonstrate their personal commitment to following COVID safe practices. It was developed by the New Mexico Hospitality Association to encourage COVID safe practices, help unify the state, and to build consumer confidence. And although it was developed by NMHA, it's an initiative that can be utilized by businesses from any industry who want to demonstrate that they are taking precautions to help ensure the safety of their community, their staff members, and their consumers. So what is it everyone's actually committing to with the New Mexico Safe Promise? By making the New Mexico Safe Promise, residents or businesses are committing to using face covering in public, staying 6 feet away from others, staying home when sick, washing hands frequently and following recommended hygiene practices, and participating in any COVID-19 related training made available at their workplace. And all of these practices were based on guidance from the New Mexico Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control. So here's what the New Mexico Safe Promise looks like on the website at nmsafepromise.org. Once you navigate to the site, one of the first things you see is these little check boxes, and essentially you just check each box. If you notice, as you check it, the yellow check mark indicates that you've clicked it, and I left the be in the know blank so you could kind of see what that would look like. You essentially just check all of those practices, enter your name and your city, and you can also enter your organization or email if you want updates, or you're wanting to make sure it's represented as like your whole business. Both of those are optional, and then you hit submit. That takes you to a thank you page where you can download social media graphics, logos, things like that to kind of help spread the word that you've taken the promise. And I should also mention that, so it is available in English and Spanish. When you go to the website, you just need to, I've circled it here on the graphic, but you essentially just have to select the language up in the top right-hand corner of the page. So why is it important? The main reason is that it builds consumer confidence locally, regionally, and nationally. So even if you aren't a hospitality related business, this is something that can instill a sense of care and safety for your staff, your consumers, and your business partners. It's also a great marketing tool that can help set your business apart by showing that your business is taking steps to ensure the safety of everyone your business interacts with. Since the message is being promoted across the state, this also helps build a sense of community and self-accountability, where people take ownership of the role they play in helping to ensure the safety of their friends, family, and community members. And it's also an important component to recovery efforts given current consumer attitudes and behavior. So what are those attitudes? This is a recent study done by Destination Analysts, which shows a couple of different statistics, and there's one in particular I wanted to focus on. That's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and that is that 79% of Americans who plan to take a trip or weekend getaway will research how the place they are visiting is managing the COVID situation. And I know all of these are sort of travel related, but I think the data shows sort of an important fact that it shows consumers are interested in what safety precautions are being taken by the places and the businesses they're interacting with, regardless of what industry that is. And this is why building consumer confidence is such an important component to recovery, regardless of what industry. So that same study also identified practices that travelers would likely follow during their next trip. And as you can see, more than half of the travelers said they would likely be carrying hand sanitizer, following social distancing guidelines, avoiding crowds, and wearing a face mask. And the importance of this is, combined with the information from the previous slide, it shows that consumers are really taking proactive steps to ensure their safety, and they're actively seeking out information about what safety precautions the businesses they interact with are taking. So how are we getting the word out about this? First of all of the destination marketing organizations across the state are involved in this effort and actively promoting it. So it really expands the reach within the state and sort of those larger national entities that the state interacts with. And collectively, so we're doing things like digital display advertising, video advertising, social media, word of mouth, news releases, op-eds, interviews, and other earned media. And just to give you an idea of the impact we've had in promoting this initiative, so the initiative launched last week on June 8th, And since then, there have been upward of about 20,000 website visits, and almost 3/4 of that traffic was referred to the website through the referral link specific to Visit Las Cruces. So we are heavily promoting this throughout the state to really encourage people to take the promise. So next, I wanted to show you just a quick video that sums up the initiative. And this is also the video ad that is running in the state.
We're never going to stop traveling. It's part of the human spirit. We're just going to do things differently and do our part to keep everyone safe. Making the most of this beautiful life and our newest fashion accessory so that you can focus on a bit of well-deserved fun and know that we've got your back. That's our promise. We're never going to
Let me see.
stop traveling. It's part of the human spirit.
How do I actually advance the slide from here? I didn't quite figure out how to, let me see. There we go. Okay. So how can you get involved? So the best way is actually just make the promise, encourage others to make the promise. And aside from that, really getting the word out about sharing it on social media, any of your social media pages, your website, and even your storefront. So that media page that you get to after the thank you when you take the promise has a couple of different resources that are set up for, if you notice there are some graphics that say we made the promise and then I made the promise. So it's set up for both individuals and sort of collective entities if you wanted to promote that as a business. So another thing that's important with this is really discussing what the promise means with community members, staff, and customers to really get people to understand what that commitment is. You really just have to have a few talking points to kind of walk them through what the New Mexico Promise actually means. So there is another initiative that just launched, I believe as of Monday. And this is geared specifically toward hospitality related businesses in the industries of hotels and lodging, restaurants, golf courses, tour operators, retailers, spas, and salons. This initiative is a free on-demand series of trainings for owners and managers that aligns with the COVID safe practices issued by the state. You can find more information about that initiative by visiting nmsafecertified.org. And again, although this was another initiative developed for the hospitality and tourism industry, it appears there are plans to add additional training modules for other industries. So if you visit the site, you can actually enter your contact info and get notified as new training modules are available. I would also encourage you to reach out to any of your industry specific associations and see what they're doing within your specific industry. And then a quick note, just kind of the key differentiator between the NMSafe certified program and the NMSafe promise are that the NMSafe promise is really open to anyone within any industry who wants to show their commitment to safety. And the certified program is currently open to only those hospitality related businesses. And it has that additional layer of accountability associated with the certification process. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Paul, I just want to say thank you so much for presenting this information today. I think it was great. I just had a quick question on getting back to travel, that slide with all that data there. It was done by Destination Analysts. Do you know anything about them, if they did any polling in New Mexico or anything, or if that was just more of a national poll.
So that information actually came from the state. I can actually get back to you with some more detailed info about what, where they compiled some of that data from. But I believe it was a national study, not necessarily like regionalized.
Wonderful, thank you, sir. And then the rest of the committee members and everyone else on the Zoom call today, if you'll just go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions, and we'll unmute you to go ahead and ask those. Okay.
Chris, I have a question.
Of course, yes, sir.
This is Doug Cowan with Cornerstone, and on your slide presentation, it showed that there was how folks are doing some research on the where they're going to travel, and do we have any data on what they're actually researching? I know you showed a subsequent slide after that, and it showed approximately 50%, slightly over 50% are checking on what they're going to do, PPE or distancing. So do you know what else they're researching? Are they just simply researching what's open?
I can request that info from the state and see if I can actually get more of the full study. I know I sat in on a couple presentations where this was kind of a component from that. I'm not sure of, I think it was really looking at travelers' sort of perceptions, and it was trying to gauge some of the trends that we're seeing in the travel and tourism industry. But I'm not, I can get some more information and send it out to the group.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Miller has his hand raised. Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Hi, George Miller. Nice presentations. I appreciate your that we're doing some good work at the state level. Question on the New Mexico Safe Promise. Is this really for more information? And you said to develop confidence and sense of safety in the community. Would it help to have more of some type of teeth to it a little bit, where like the New Mexico Safe Certified gives you a certification where a business could, or a nonprofit could actually embrace these kind of this information and actually put it on their webpage that they're supporting it? Or how would you suggest we use that in that kind of a case?
So you're asking just about how to actually promote the idea that you've taken the promise, anything like that? Right,
but are you planning to put out, say if we were going to promote the practice or the promise, are you going to have some, like you said, social media things that we can put on our websites and Facebook, and that's showing that we're following kind of these guidance or these suggestions?
Yeah, so I can, and maybe I can actually, let me navigate over to the website and I can kind of show you what that would look like. Because there is, so the thank you page, once you take the promise, and actually you can access it via the media page on the site, but it will give you access to a bunch of graphics that have already been created that you can easily upload to social media. So it has hashtags, things like that you can use, but there's, you can click here and it'll actually take you to where you can get a Facebook frame for your social media profile. There's a couple of different variations, light or dark variations I made, and we made the promise. There's cover banners for Facebook pages, and then there's a bunch of different logo files with, again, all of those sort of different variations on, yeah, so that's, all of those resources are available on the website.
Mr. Miller, this is Cristiano Martinez for the record. Did that answer your question?
Are you talking about? Yes, it did. It's nice, I guess, to really promoting the sense of safety in the community. Yeah, that it's okay that we making a promise to kind of follow the practices. But I like the New Mexico Safe Certified, where we can actually put onto our website that we have a certification that we're actually following those kind of things. That's a nice, maybe follow on. So yeah, it does answer the question.
Thank you.
And with that, the certification process, like I said, you can actually go on that website and you can submit your contact info, and then as they add industries, but I know they're also going to be building a directory out of that as well within that site for businesses that actually got certified.
Awesome. Mr. Harris, you had your hand raised next. If you want to go ahead.
Sure. Michael Harris for the record. That was actually going to be part of my follow-on question is there going to be a directory that shows businesses that have done this? Because otherwise, like for the New Mexico Safe Promise, you can put your name in the form, but then what happens to that?
So I know there was discussions about that at the state level. I think I'm not quite sure if there's going to necessarily be a directory, because there's so many entries that are coming through from all different portions of the state. But I can definitely ask the question and see if there is the potential to use that information for something like a directory, either locally or at the state level.
Or maybe like some statistics, at the city level, hey, here's how many people have, done this, and promotion like that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think because they launched it last week, they are waiting to get a decent amount of data collected. So I would imagine we would at least get sort of aggregate statistics of how many people are signing up from different cities. And that's why the name and city would be the required fields.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Debbie Moore. Go ahead.
Debbie Moore, Greater Las Cruces Chamber of Commerce. Just to follow up, Michael, on the chamber is actually going to try to do some directory type information of the certification. The certification, and just for clarification, which we're working real close with the state on, is certification that you have gone through that course. It's not certification as to the safety or et cetera of that, but I think it is a really important thing for our businesses and community to get out, and that will be able to in any business in the community. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet, but I've been working with the state on that. And to Mr. Miller's comments, you can go to that sheet, and there's also going to be a badge that you can print out and put once your manager and or your employees have gone through that. So what they're recommending is that perhaps the mid managers to the manager himself go through it, and then they could train the trainer type thing through and do that with the employees so that they all are. Many of our local businesses have already done this on their own to a certain degree, some other training courses. I'm very proud of what they've done. But the chamber is trying to take a lead in working with the state. And as these come out, we will launch them on our website and social media. And they're also working to develop all these videos in Spanish. And I know they were working on that last week when I talked to them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Any other questions regarding the presentation we just had? You'll go ahead and raise your hand in the chat box and we can call it. Okay, as I'm seeing none, Once again, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on today and talking to us about the New Mexico Safe Practices Promise. We really do appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great day, sir. Okay, moving on, we are going to go over the current business development initiatives during COVID that Las Cruces has already kind of started on and started implementing. So if we can go ahead and hear from you all on that.
Thank you all. I'm Mandy Gus. I'm with the city's Economic Development Department. I'm the Business Development Administrator. I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes, Mandy, we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I wanted to just talk, this is kind of a list of some of our initiatives. I'm going to talk about the collaborative partners we've worked with, some communications that we've had ongoing with the businesses. CE Labs did a flash assessment for us, a technical assistance program that we'll be launching for microloans, and then just overall contact information for our team to help businesses as we move kind of from crisis mode into recovery mode. So for starters, I wanted to talk about our partners. Very early in the process, we had a phone call with many of our resource partners that included the chambers, the Green Chamber, the Greater Chamber. We met with Joanne from Sbdc, who I know is going to be talking a little bit later. And in the meantime, we've also had conversations with Arrowhead at Nmsu and the New Mexico Economic Development Department. With each of these partners, there's been different types of programs that have been launched. For example, with the Greater Chamber, they launched Zoom Fridays, and so we're working with them to help promote those programs. Businesses can learn about different things as they bring in experts to talk about how to deal with COVID, the pandemic. Sbdc, we use them really as a referral source. We had so many people calling us at the beginning about the PPP loans and the economic injury disaster loans. I think I said that correctly. And so we relied heavily on helping connect businesses to Sbdc to help walk them through those processes. With Arrowhead, Arrowhead put together a series where businesses could submit a 2-minute video just talking about the things that they had done to adjust to COVID, as well as what they're doing now for recovery. We've seen some success with that. We haven't had a lot of businesses jump on board to submit those videos, so I would encourage the businesses on this call, those who listen to it later, and I would be open to hearing ideas of how we can better promote that as an opportunity. And then the New Mexico Economic Development Department launched the Buy for Tomorrow Today website very early on, and so we helped promote that as well. The idea was to leverage all of our resources, make sure that businesses knew what resources were there, and make referrals to help them get through these issues. I will tell you, one of the things that we noticed is the volume of requests changed drastically. At the end of March and beginning of April, we were getting calls and emails on a lot in probably the first 4 weeks. Since then, it kind of calmed down. We had a lot of people anxious for like the governor's orders. Each time she did a press conference, we got a few calls. What is she going to say? We didn't have any advance notice of that, but trying to share that information out as it came to us. But overall, now I think businesses, number one, they moved out of panic mode. They kind of they figured out how they were going to adjust. And now as we move into recovery mode, I think most businesses are doing the work of getting their businesses back online. And so while our calls and the people for help, calling us for help has reduced, I think that it's now on us to make sure we continue to be a resource and let folks know we're here if we need them, but allow them to do that work if they don't need us. Some ongoing communications that we had last year, the city of Las Cruces changed our business registration, and we now have business registration through a new form called Acela, and it's done online. And one of the things that that requires is an email address, which was actually very helpful for us because as we went into the pandemic, we were able to upload all of the business registration emails into Constant Contact and send out messages. And we've sent probably two or more emails a week, depending on the amount of information that was coming out. As we know, there was a lot of information. It was sometimes changing rapidly. So I asked to, based on the open rate, my team let me know which were the most popular emails that we sent. The most popular was the self-employed stimulus payment program that came out of our workforce at the state level. And I will tell you, even after we sent that one, we continued to get emails and calls about that. I think that system, was completely overwhelmed with the number of people that were looking for that. We also had many businesses open. The Department of Health sent out flyers to put up in your businesses. As you can see, that was very popular. That number 3 was just it says general COVID-19 resources. That email was actually sent on, I'm trying to see what day, it was right when it started on March the 19th. So that was one of our very first emails. I think people were just looking for any information at all. And in that email, we listed some things from the New Mexico Economic Development Department, SBA, and then the CDC and WHO. Another popular email was that Buy for Tomorrow Today program through New Mexico Economic Development Department. Really, that was businesses figuring out how they took some of their products online immediately. How did they continue to give business when they were not allowed to have their doors open? And then the other most popular email was the City of Las Cruces Utilities Assistance Program when they opened that up to some small businesses. We've also done some proactive outreach to specific industries. There was some program that came out that was agriculture specific. Didn't make sense to send that email to all 3,000 businesses in our registered businesses list. So we reached out directly to agricultural businesses. And some of the items, we also made some proactive outreach to retail, restaurant, and arts. As there was information that was specific to them instead of all blanketed businesses. Next slide there was a CE Labs is a company that we worked with to do a flash assessment. This was requested by City Council through some of the COVID response funds that they set aside from the Telshore Fund. So CE Labs did interviews with some industry leaders in our community from different industries to see how they'd been impacted differently. The work of that was to determine the impact of COVID, figure out some recovery projections, what we thought the recovery would be with or without interventions. And they made a report to City Council on May 26th. Right now, I think that information really was just getting information, making some projections, and then our department will look at how we move forward with that information. One of the other programs that was requested through City Council with the COVID response funds was technical assistance for microloans. We know that there was an outpouring of need with the Paycheck Protection loans, as well as the emergency disaster recovery loans. But we knew that there will be some need for smaller loans, microloans. We identified a partner in Lift Fund, and our plan is to launch a 6-month pilot that will focus on COVID recovery response. So we have, it says launch upon final signature. I made this slide actually yesterday morning, but as of this morning, I got an email that legal has signed off on it. So hopefully we'll be able to launch that program as soon as in the next week. And just for your information, some of the metrics in that program that are important are that Lift Fund, who will be our partner, will meet with and serve at least 50 businesses. of those 50 businesses, we expect at least 20 of them to receive loans, and for that total loan amount to be that $500,000. And really what we want to see is that at least 20 businesses are retained that would have gone out of business without it, or they're able to expand and grow through the recovery, and that we will have about 20 jobs that would have been lost without this program will be retained in our community. So that's really important for us. And then moving along, and unfortunately, I don't think the color is helpful, so I can send this out, send it out to Cindy to send to the whole group. Is I just wanted to let you know that the business development team, there are 4 of us. I'm the administrator, and then I also have Elizabeth Teeters, Donald Bustos, and Cruz Ramos, all 3 who have been responding as quickly as we can as business inquiries come in, concerns, again, connecting all of those businesses with resources as appropriate. And I would like to take this time also to thank our partners in the chambers, in Sbdc, in Arrowhead, in New Mexico Economic Development Department, as I'm sure there's others that I've somehow missed, but because I think we've had a lot more phone calls with each other than usual. We've had emails back and forth, and really trying to use that network to help businesses when they obviously needed it. And really now, as we move into recovery mode, how do we help them take that next step to, number 1, get back to where they were before the pandemic, but number 2, then grow and prosper beyond that. And so with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Gus. If anyone has any questions, if you'll just raise your hand in the comments so we can go ahead and get you unmuted. Mr. Harris. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael Harris. So I was wondering, what is the average amount of those microloans that you're partnering with Lyft Fund to give out?
So it will depend on what the need is. Our plan is, of course, if you have that, I have to jump off and do the math real quick. We'd like to see $500,000 over at least 20 companies, which equals to about $25,000 per loan. We know that some will be bigger. We know that some will be smaller as needed.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I see Griselda has her hand up. Ms. Martinez, go ahead.
Yes.
Griselda, you've muted yourself.
Thank you. The model that CDFIs have, such as Lyft Fund, they do loans for ranges starting at 2,000, and usually they stop up to 100,000, in which the companies that need a bigger amount than that are very likely to be eligible for the traditional banking institutions. So that's the range that they can do.
Okay. Anyone else? If you can do the little chat box, raise hand.
I believe Joanne wants to speak.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Joanne?
I apologize. I couldn't find the raise hand in the chat or in my box. On the question for the loans, are there any specific requirements that the businesses need to meet in order to be qualified for a loan?
Thanks, Joanne. We don't have those program details figured out yet. But as soon as we launch the program, I will be sure to send all that information out so that you'll know that. We do ask them to focus on local businesses instead of large corporate businesses, which I think is important. And obviously, I think those local businesses are the ones that are in need of those micro loans more than the larger loans.
Thank you.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Griselda Martinez for the record, and another big component to that to the technical assistance. That's why we approached it in such way, is that some of these businesses are not eligible for loans because they're not prepared to not only receive the loan but pay it back. So the technical assistance will help in getting those businesses ready to be able to be eligible for a loan, but more importantly, to be able to pay it back with the success of the business. So that's why it's a two-part approach here.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Harris.
Michael Harris. So that actually kind of answers my question. I was going to ask if there was any kind of forgiveness part of that program, similar to PPP, you know, if they used it for certain things or met certain metrics. But it sounds like probably not, and the technical assistance is mainly meant to help them pay it back eventually. So what are maybe you don't have these details yet, but are they specifically going to be really low interest loans with a long payback period, or any more details like that you have?
Mr. Harrison, I'm glad Griselda pointed out that our agreement with Lift Fund is to provide that technical assistance. So they will be helping businesses prep their financials. How do I apply for a loan? How do I work through those processes? I know that there are some loans that are available low interest, but the city won't actually be managing the loan program. We're managing the program to help businesses prep for, go through the process, and then pay back those loans. And I appreciate Griselda pointing that out, because I do think that that's important to note in this.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Ms. Gus, I actually have a question for you. What is the time frame or the timeline that you guys will be doing this assistance for? Like, what is the longevity, and is it sustainable for your department to be doing this in the long run?
So we actually had started to look at a program for this technical assistance prior to the COVID situation. However, we had not yet been able to get that off the ground. And then we saw it as a very important need when we went into the pandemic. So the agreement that we have put in place will be a 6-month pilot program with COVID recovery as the focus. So that will be in place for the next 6 months. I think at that point in time, our department will determine if we can continue a technical assistance program and if we want to expand the focus beyond COVID recovery.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that. With that being said, with the 6-month planning, I know that a lot of different organizations are looking at that December 31st deadline of getting all their, assistance out and planning and stuff like that. And I think that's something really important to look at is, how to plan for future events if something like this happens, especially with those microloans. And when I think of a microloan, you said 20 companies with that 500,000, which is a large chunk of change. But I know a lot of sole proprietor business owners that are doing a small business out of their house that are desperately hurting for, $600, $700. So I think that's something that we really can look at and help with. And I think that's something that really could, help in the long run. So, but thank you for that. I appreciate you. Ms. Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I totally agree with you. I think that's why I wanted to clarify that the range of loans go between 2,000 and 100,000, because one of the reasons why we partner with a community development financial institution such as Lit Fund is that the part of their mission is to do loans that may not be as profitable as a traditional loan. And so that's a big important distinction. With this pilot program focusing on the recovery in the short run, we also want to gain traction for other opportunities that we may have to continue this partnership and expand it to other potential funding sources. One of the overhead cost of these loans is the overriding cost, and so how do we assist these CDFIs to continue to serve our market? So we plan to launch this, get traction, really test the market, and make sure that we are indeed with that financial gap, and then hopefully from that other opportunities arise with other partners, including traditional banking institutions as potential lending entities to the CDFI or other funding sources.
Awesome, thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Harris.
It's Michael Harris. So I guess I'm also kind of interested in specifically what kinds of technical assistance you're thinking of. Are you trying to go into businesses that might, like sole proprietorships, or somebody who's not really focused so much on the financial aspects and helping them, here's what a loan application looks like, guiding them through the process like that, and then expanding. It sounds like you want future expansion, so helping them, with bookkeeping and other types of things in the future.
Mr. Harris, you're correct. So the first step, I think, is getting a feel for the need of what technical assistance is needed. But the idea is, and the programs, the company that we're working with has programs in other communities, and they do some things that are along the lines of business coaching. What does your business plan look like? But more importantly, how does that look like financially? How do you put together your financials for a lending institution to look at? How do you put together that bookkeeping? How do you put together that information? We've talked about technical assistance in both a group setting where you would be where LiftFund would be talking to a group of business owners, but also one-on-one coaching and digging into a business's specific financials. And ideally, what we're looking for with LiftFund is, like you said, we're started from that starting where they maybe only need a $2,000 loan to cover a piece of equipment, to, as they build that credit, as they're able to build their financial history in the business, and they grow, they would eventually graduate, so to speak, into traditional potential loans with larger banking institutions. So that would be a long-term goal.
Great. Yeah, I think that's something that's really, really needed in the community, based on my experience and talking to other people. That kind of technical knowledge, isn't universal, and a lot of people don't focus on it. Thanks.
And we know that entrepreneurs are busy running their businesses, and so sometimes, that the skills of being innovative, creative, and starting the business, they're not always thinking, also I need to do bookkeeping and manage. And so we want to make sure that we're able to help them do both of those things.
Yep, that's a very good point.
Okay, I'm gonna go, and then Mr. Miller has his hand raised. Have we thought about contacting the Nmsu Small Business Development Center and having them kind of assist with this? Because that sounds like something that's totally in their realm of operation, and it also helps kind of with that technical side as well of business planning. Because then once you get those business plans in order, which they can help with, it also opens you up to a lot of other kind of assistance through SBA and everything else like that. So that might be something that we can jump in there and go ahead and start recommending to people, because I love the NMSU Small Business Development Center. Big fan. So just a thought.
Yes, and actually when we initially started talking about this program before it became COVID recovery specific, we had conversations with Joanne, and she was one of the people on our board to evaluate some of the proposals for the program.
Awesome. Mr. Miller.
You're kind of leading the right way that I was thinking. we're getting down to the smaller levels of business, small businesses, and how to get them fully functional and back up and running. What about the people? Many of the folks I'm working with is a nonprofit, or the workers, I think, and they've been laid off, or their unemployment benefits are going to run out sometime. Many of the businesses can't hire all those employees back, I think, is what I'm hearing. And some small businesses just won't come back, I think. Also, I don't know statistics on that, but what do we have in place with like, I think the recovery, you have to start with the businesses because that kind of drives it. But to replace lost businesses, do we have? I know the Economic Development Center helps a little bit with that, but to help people that are like currently unemployed, I think, that would like to get into that, to help them get started. Do you have? I wish Workforce Solutions was here, because they have a program where they'll train someone that's unemployed for 6 months, paying their. This will help businesses paying the salary for the person to intern until they're fully trained, I guess, and then the business will pick them up. And so that's a big help to existing businesses. But is there something like that going on that we can help the unemployed folks, or get them into startup businesses? I don't hear that piece anywhere yet.
So Mr. Miller, at this point, we don't have a program like that in place. I think you're right. I do believe that Workforce Connections has some information, and probably we need to lean back on them to see what those resources are, because I think those are important.
Awesome, thank you, Mandy. Ms. Sharon Thomas.
Can you hear me now? So I just wanted to say that Workforce Connections and the Workforce Talent Collaborative are both in the process of doing business roundtables and sector strategies. So we're trying to look at each of the different business sectors in the community and see what are the actual jobs they have and what kinds of employees they actually need. I'm on the Workforce Connection board, and I'm also work with the Workforce Talent Collaborative. And so we're working toward making sure that the training programs we're putting together actually fit jobs that are available in these communities. So so far the Workforce Talent Collaborative has done the aerospace and that area. The next will be the international business. We're going to do health. We're going to do, a number of business sectors. And then, so yes, go to Workforce Connections. They have programs in place right now, but they should be getting better, because we're discovering there are a lot of jobs in our area. We just people don't always have the skills that they need. So we're trying to work towards making sure that training programs really offer that kind of training to people that will actually end up in a local job. I had a question for Mandy about, would you say a little more about the institution you're working with? I work with the public bank people, and so I'm interested in knowing what this institution is. Not a lot, but just how I can find out more about them.
Sure. The company that we're working with is called Lift Fund, and
say that again?
Lift Fund.
Lift Fund.
And they have just recently expanded into our region. And I'd be happy to send you I can send some information to the group as well.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Ms. Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak about Mr. Miller's question. So as Mandy mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, one of the partners that we are working with, in addition to Sbdc and West and SCORE, we are also work closely with the Arrowhead Center at Nmsu, and their sole mission is to cover entrepreneurship, and Brooke Montgomery is here online, so she can speak to that as well. But one of the specific areas that we are working through our processes is to replicate a program that Arrowhead Center launched for business accelerators. about 2 months ago. They had a large number of companies interested in participating here in Las Cruces, and they were only able to accept 3 out of 43, I think. And a big component to that business accelerator was not only well, with COVID in mind, it was to find new markets and also to expand into e-commerce. So what we're working with them is to partner for a Las Cruces specific business accelerator. And so hopefully we're able to meet our deadline of June 30th to have something in place, but that's something very important for us as well. Brooke, would you like to expand on that?
Hey, Brooke Montgomery for the record. Thanks, Griselda. So we have various accelerators. They're about 5 to 6 weeks long, and we have pivoted them to help address the needs of COVID for small businesses and entrepreneurs. So we had already had these in place before. The difference now is that we have some professionals from the community along with ourselves who are doing one-on-one consulting on how businesses can pivot or how they can address the needs of their clientele and continue their bringing in revenue during this time. So like Griselda said, we only brought in, I think, 3 from Las Cruces. We actually, right when the stay-at-home order started, had 256 applicants, and we usually take 14 to 20 businesses. So we have expanded the sprints, and we have given maybe 5 or 6 in order to reach everybody. So we are focusing on having one in Las Cruces, just for Las Cruces small businesses. So hopefully we'll get that out and the application out by the end of the month. And you can always reach me if you have any questions coming.
Awesome, thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Miss Debbie, Miss Moore, you had your hand raised.
I did. I was trying to lower my hand and then unmute at the same time. I'm going to respond a little bit to Mr. Miller, what I addressed a little bit that I think this recovery board really needs to think about is, if you've heard me through this COVID thing from the chamber's perspective, and as I've worked with organizations, you know, we have pivoted, gone from the reaction to COVID immediately. We have now pivoted to sort of that recovery, and then we have to navigate those waters and to go to success. So I think part of what I feel like this mission of this board is how do we connect those employees with those job opportunities within our community, not just when everyone's open, but in the long term. And I've made my board, I've said, we're looking at a 24-month to 36-month quote unquote recovery to finding and adapting that new norm. I think one question that I've always been asking about is, I don't know that we're going to know who actually is going to be unemployed until after July 31st, after the unemployment things end. I think at that time, many of our small businesses are going to kind of regroup, navigate, pivot. And I have I know there's some small business owners on this call, how you staff it. And so where are our vacancies going to go? So working with the chairman referred to the Workforce Collaborative, the Bridge of Southern New Mexico, the chamber. We're trying real hard to connect those dots to get them from whatever training they need, but also in that meantime, how are we responding to that critical need of food security, home security for those unemployed? So I think it's the whole package here, that pivoting is one thing for business. It's also pivoting for the employee. Are they going to have a job after August 1st? And where is that going to lead? So I think we have to be fluid, we have to be adaptable, but I just think that's something this recovery board needs to look at, is not just, it's the whole city moving forward and how we connect those dots. We're working with Nmsu and Diana Community College to train, and as well as Joanne just put her camera on, Sbdc. I'm a big fan of small business development, but I'm also cognizant that we've got to connect the dots. We've got to connect those unemployed with the jobs. And if those jobs aren't there, to Sharon's point, what jobs are going to be there and how do we train them? So I think it's really important for this board to realize it's business is one thing, jobs creation is nothing, but also the employees to fill those jobs. And in the meantime, how are we as a community responding to those needs of both the business and the employees? So that's my thoughts.
Okay, I have Mr. Miller and also Joanne. Joanne, are you just wanting to respond to Ms. Moore?
Yeah, yes, I wanted to add to what Debbie was saying. One of the things that I'm finding with some of the small business owners is they're not really sure how to leverage the PPP and the idle. And we got good news on Monday that the idle port was open, and that was a nice surprise. And so one of the things that myself and my advisors are doing is we're proactively reaching out to small business owners, asking them, were you able to apply for the idle the first round? If not, are you going to apply this round? And I have actually had small business owners who are doing well during the pandemic because, they're essential businesses, and they had not even applied for PPP or the idle, thinking, well, I'm doing well, so I don't need it. And my conversation with them is, well, there's some changes with the Flexibility Act, and you should take advantage of the PPP, use that to pay for your payroll, and it's been extended 24 weeks because that's going to help some of those employees who are on unemployment that will go off on July 31st to get them hired back. And I think we need to educate them and have that conversation with them that, wait, you don't have the 8 weeks anymore. You will have to ask your lender for the 24 weeks. And how do you leverage that PPP to not only make a profit for your business, but also get these employees back? And so it's really the proactive approach of contacting our business owners, because some of those businesses that have opened, they've even told me, you know what, I have not had time to look up what business resources are out there or what changes have been made, because they're so busy just trying to get going again with their businesses. And so I just wanted to add that to what Debbie mentioned.
Awesome. I think this is going to be a great discussion item for next week, but let's go ahead and get Mr. Miller, and then we can kind of move on since we're getting pretty far out there. Mr. Miller?
Right. Yeah, just to follow up on the last three speakers, I think, Debbie and Brooke and Joanne. Yeah, there's a lot of things changing in the playing field, but still not hearing so much about, I know about matching workers to the jobs, but I don't hear about, I think an opportunity we're missing is job creation, new job. It's a great opportunity to help build the Las Cruces with new kind of things we want to do. And we can start off and create. This is the most unemployment since the Great Depression. And so back then they were pretty creative and they did CCC things, but I don't know if we want to get into that. The city may not have the funds for it, but we only get 3 startups, I guess. Is that what Brooke said? That something's wrong with the resources. We're not connecting right. I don't hear anything about creating new jobs, new businesses yet, and those kind of things. And that can help drive this thing also. Just a comment there. That might be something we recommend to the council.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Francisco. Francisco?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. My apologies. I was muted. Francisco Payares for the record. I just wanted to keep everyone in mind that the next presentation, we're not done with the second bullet point yet. It's Joanne Garay, actually. So she was leading the conversation into some of the actions that Sbdc can create for the businesses. And some of so if you wanted to sequence that towards Joanne, and as well as we have one more item as well pending on the discussion, just to keep mind of everyone's time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm perfectly fine with that. If we wanted to start looking at that and moving on, that would be fine. Any other questions or comments or concerns? Okay, Joanne.
Hi, I apologize. I hadn't even introduced myself. I'm Joanne Garay. I'm the Center Director for the Small Business Development Center here at Doña Ana Community College. We are one of 18 centers across the state who help small business owners or help persons who want to start or expand their businesses. And we provide technical assistance in business planning, financial projections, growing or expanding their businesses. And everything we do is strictly confidential and it's at no cost. what we're doing to help our small business owners through this pandemic is we are offering live webinar trainings through our state office, and it's with New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and it's at nmsbdc.org. And because it's this, all the rules are ever changing, and one day to the next things are different. We are offering the different trainings. We don't keep them recorded because, again, there are different changes that are happening on a daily basis with the pandemic, and also with the rules and regulations with SBI on the loans. What we are teleworking, but we are offering consultations through phone and Zoom. And at first we thought that might be a challenge, but we're actually finding that people are changing, and they are willing to go through that challenge, and we do the webinars. With the EIDL, and I mentioned earlier that opened up on Monday, we are helping the small business owners walk through the step-by-step on how to apply for the EIDL. There were so many small business owners who were not able to apply for that in the first round, and we're thankful that it opened up again. Another change that happened was the PPP Flexibility Act, and it changed from the 75-25, which was 75% had to be used for payroll and 25% for payment on mortgage interest or rent, utilities, and interest on any loan that was incurred before February 20th. Well, that changed. It is now 60-40. So 60% can now be used for payroll. And they found that a lot of small business owners, the 75% was hard to match. And they've extended the forgiveness from the 8 weeks to 24 weeks, especially for these small businesses that could not open, like gyms and spas and restaurants. And so that's going to help a lot of those small business owners get these, hire these employees back. And another issue that they had was they couldn't get some of these employees back. And so with the changes of the PPP, they can now use that and bring these employees back later as their businesses are ramping up again. The loan amount, the portion that is not forgivable will turn into a loan. It's a 1% loan, and they extended that from 2 years to 5 years, which will also help the small business owner. And so what we're finding is some small business owners, they're not aware of the changes, and they were trying to meet those payroll within those 8 weeks and that 78%. So now we're trying to go back and educate these small business owners on that. And also those who were not able to get into the EIDL, they weren't even aware that it was open. It was quite a surprise for us. We happened to follow upon that on Monday. And in fact, I texted Debbie right away about that. So I think right now, our biggest push is to find these, get back to these small business owners and help them apply for these loans so that they can, one, hopefully make a profit or stay open and bring these employees back. And that's basically what we do. And we can be reached at 527-7676, or our email is sbdcinfo@nmsu.edu. And I'm open to questions. I wanted to point out what George Miller, he had mentioned about the startup on the small businesses, and we are getting people who are calling us and inquiring about starting a business. They're finding new ways to even pivot their existing business. We have some expansions where they're going to be adding jobs, and then we have those who are wanting to start businesses. So we are providing technical assistance in that area. And one of the other things that we've changed during the COVID that we're actually putting a lot more stress on is what is their contingency plan? If there's a second wave of this, or if we have another kind of disaster, what is that contingency plan? And so we're really stressing that more and more with our clients.
Thank you so much, Jen. I think that is a great presentation. I agree with you about the planning for the future, because I think that is something that this board that we have really needs to focus on, is future planning for this. Ms. Montgomery, you have your hand raised if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Brooke Montgomery here. And just to kind of add on that as well, as John, at the Arrowhead Center Studio G, we are an entrepreneurship incubator. So if anybody, we have been actually had an increase of students and community members interested in starting businesses. And if I just wanted to add that in, so if anybody knows anyone who wants to start a business or is looking to create more jobs, they can also contact me. I'll put my email in here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Montgomery. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, or concerns for Ms. Garvey? I see none. Okay, so let's go ahead and then move on to the next discussion topic, which I think more people can actively participate in, since it kind of has a larger range of people's comfort levels, which is going to be the public confidence during COVID. I know, Doug, you're on this call. We kind of talked about this the last time, that this was a very big concern of ours for future planning, and also how to reinvigorate people wanting to get out in Cruces and start lifting up the economy again. So let's go ahead and just kind of start that conversation. If anyone has any ideas or thoughts on how to make people feel more comfortable. We did have the New Mexico Safe Practices Promise presentation, which kind of goes over everything that we just talked about. So that is included in this. I'm going to share my screen here in a minute of like the New Mexico Restaurant Association, their Safe Promises. And that's something that we've really gone with, and I know other restaurateurs in town and restaurant owners have done. So I see Doug has his hand up right now. Doug, if you want to go ahead and start us off, and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you. Yes, Doug Cowan from Cornerstone. I seen in the Las Cruces bulletin, and Mr. Chair, I think I sent you an email. I wasn't sure, according to the proper rules, if I was allowed to share that with everybody else via email. And I'm not sure I know how to exactly share it now on the screen. I might be able to if that's allowed. But there was an article in the Las Cruces bulletin that I think the way it was presented was extremely helpful, in that they presented not just the usual how many cases of COVID and how many people are dying, but they also shared some very important data, and that was they shared population, infections, recovery, and then fatalities. And so what I was able to do is I took that information that the Las Cruces bulletin had, and I created a small spreadsheet showing that data in Dona Ana County, and then also statewide, and then likewise in the entire country, United States. And I think one of the ways to help build some confidence and some successes is the recovery rate and the non-infection rate is astoundingly high. In other words, the non-infection rate is somewhere around 99%. It's incredible. And then the recovery rate is over 99%. So the non-infection rate is like 99.6, and the recovery rate is like 99.3. It's an incredible stat. Now, when you take that, so how can we use those kind of statistics? Initially, they were using the negative side of those statistics, right, to try to motivate people to take very high precautionary measures. And we understand that. But now, as we go into a recovery mode, I think it's important to share the success side of that. So while we incorporate the safety measures that we're all taking, I've seen yours that you're using at your restaurant. And the Restaurant Association, I think I submitted mine to everybody that we're using at the church with our suggested from our insurance company as well as our legal team. And so we want to make sure that we're not minimizing a real risk, but at the same time that we are maximizing for sure the successes. And so those statistics are very, very interesting on a spreadsheet. And with your permission, I'd like to be able to email that maybe to everybody, unless you can tell me how to share it.
Francisco, do you know if that it's okay to share that through email, or is there any certain guidelines that we need to look at on that?
Mr. Chair, as far as I know, perhaps we can get some further direction from Griselda if necessary. But so long as there's no discussion, I think you can share the spreadsheets and you can share some of the information. But I think the discussion has to be in public setting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong with that. Just to double check.
That's correct. As long as there is no discussion, information can be shared as Mr. Chair did with the New Mexico restaurant information as well.
Awesome, thank you. So Doug, if you want to go ahead and I think we need to get everyone's email address because I don't think we have everyone's yet. So once we get that, we can go ahead and share that so everyone can go through it. And then I think the public confidence probably is going to be a continuance on the discussion item. So it's something that we can definitely revisit. I think it's going to be an important one to talk about for sure. If that's okay with you, sir.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. Ms. Martinez, I see that your hand's raised. Do you want to go ahead?
Hi, everybody. This is Jolene Martinez from Families and Youth Incorporated. Anytime I think about, consumer confidence, we serve and represent some of the most vulnerable families in Las Cruces. So my concern is, while yes, we need to boost confidence, I think we also need to acknowledge some of the statistics and how they're also disproportionately affecting people of color, people in poverty, people with diabetes, people who are at greater risk of illness. And so I think as we boost confidence, I think we also have to have a safety plan for families who are most at risk for exposure. And so when I think we say businesses are reopening, I think we should also have businesses have alternative plans for those people who are most at risk. And so I think one of the things that we've seen is as restaurants continue to open up, still having options for delivery, still having meals, maybe a meal that is available like a daily special that's $5.99, that's maybe affordable for families to still be able to go out and eat and still enjoy the safeties and the comforts of trying to quarantine, because I think that some of those families still really struggle. There's no consumer confidence outside of a pandemic, much less developing confidence again after a pandemic. And so I think any interest that I would have would be really about how do we continue to protect people as we reemerge. And just I really like the presentation regarding the safe promises. And maybe us coming up with a version of that for our, asking the city to come up with a version of that says, safe promises, some kind of promise initiative that we have, but also that includes organizations that are willing to commit to practices that still serve vulnerable families. Because I think that, for families who, there's a lot of families in our community who already don't access restaurants or who already don't access personal care services. It's just they're not in their budget or reality of them returning. And so I think some of the services that they're interested in reaccessing or gaining confidence around are just basic services like going back to the grocery store, not paying for grocery delivery, having confidence in going back to the park. A lot of the families in poverty are just looking for basic safety practices that, I might be able to afford a $10 sandwich from Walmart and take my family to the park. I can, may not be able to afford all these other expenses. And so I think keeping in mind how we make suggestions for low cost, low barrier services for families as they reopen as well, and how we build confidence there across the continuum for the Las Cruces community, because not, you know, there's a good portion of our community that doesn't have the resources to participate in any kind of business. You know, we just looking at those survival services, transportation, medical services, food, you know, those 10 thriving services that Mayor Pro Tem Ganda always pushes. You know, that's really the only amount of services that they participate in is the 10 thriving services and survival services. And so it's making sure we build confidence around there for our most vulnerable citizens in Las Cruces.
Thank you so much, Ms. Martinez. I think you're definitely on to a really good talking point there. Mr. Harris, you have your hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Michael Harris. So kind of to follow up on that, but I was reading some articles this morning, and there's also people who, you know, aren't necessarily in survival mode, but who also won't be accessing these services for other reasons. So for instance, we're looking at probably between 30 and 70% of people who just work in offices aren't going to go back to their office in any meaningful way. And basically they'll transition to being telework. They're not going to lose their jobs, but also they have no reason to come into work. And if you have no reason to commute from your house, you know, out in Sonoma Ranch or the new developments out there into town, why would you ever go to a restaurant again for lunch? Or, you know, if you have to pay $10 to have it delivered out there, you know, why would you do that? So I think we're going to see a pretty big shift in consumption of these service industries because of, you know, people aren't going to be commuting and aren't going to be working in offices anymore. So there's that. So I think we are going to have to see a pretty big pivot in what kinds of businesses we're providing and what kinds of services. And certainly there are a lot of vulnerable people who, if you could have all the confidence in the world that somebody is going to clean their restaurant, but it's not worth the risk of, like I have an employee, for instance, and if she gets COVID, she will die, like, period, because she has some issues. And you know, it's just not worth the risk to ever to ever come out until there's a vaccine. So you know, it's not just a fear thing. There are some real legit reasons why things aren't gonna just kind of recover like normal. And also somebody else brought up earlier that we're really looking at like a 24 to 36 month recovery time. There's talk of vaccines and stuff, but that's not a 6-month timeline. That's a 14-month timeline at minimum to go through trials and whatnot. And then you have to, someone gave a presentation in a recent city council meeting from the Department of Health. And, you know, you're looking at a 70% exposure rate. Maybe that, you know, we need to kind of get the herd immunity going. And so even once those things are available, you know, it's going to be a long time out. So I think we're not just looking to convince people that it's safe to go back to a restaurant, you know, next week. It's going to be a much longer term and much more complicated conversation, I think.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris. We do have 2 other hands raised, and I just wanted to kind of say a couple things really quick, and then we'll go on to Debbie and Doug. I think the purpose of like this whole discussion topic is more so to make people feel comfortable going out, to tell them what business and industry is doing that is positive, to help them feel more comfortable. Whether it's entering with a mask, having sanitizing stations set up throughout, talking about best practices and safe practices. I think that's what we need to be focusing on for this specific discussion topic, because it's a really important thing to reinvigorate the economy, because so many people rely on foot traffic retail stores, restaurants, outdoor activities, going shopping, going down to the farmer's market. We need to make sure that we are informing people of what we are doing in Las Cruces to make people feel comfortable to go out there, because that's your micro business, that's your big business, your small business, your retail stores, that's everything. We need to make them feel comfortable going out. And as Jolene Martinez was saying, we do have those individuals that cannot afford to do those things. And I get that. That is a huge concern for me and my personal business. And I know it's a concern for other business owners, but we need to start making sure that, there are so many business owners and different people in Las Cruces that are going above and beyond to make people feel comfortable and at home within my four walls or within anyone else's four walls, going to church service or going to the park, what we're doing to make sure that we are cleaning those surfaces and taking out the trash and all that stuff so people feel comfortable. And I think that's what we need to focus on, is the positives and how to tell people and get it out there into Las Cruces that, hey, the economy's open and we're doing what we can to make sure that we remain open during COVID times, whether it is that 24 or 36 month period. So I think that's kind of what we need to be focusing on, is what we can do as a collaborative and what we can recommend to the city council and the mayor to make this happen, guys. So Debbie, I'm gonna let you go next. If you wanna go ahead and talk.
I think Mr. Cowan had his hand up first, so I'm good with that.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Cohen, if you wanna go ahead and go.
Thanks, Debbie. I just wanted to pretty kind of reiterate what you just said, Mr. Chair, and that is, and of course, I deal with all different walks of life, operating the church and our school. We have folks that have affluency, and we have folks that, it's hand to mouth, and it's not even hand to mouth if they don't get some help every once in a while. And so we understand that dynamic, but it's my understanding that the purpose of what we're doing here is an economic recovery. There's entities already ensuring that folks are educated on what they're supposed to do to keep, safe, the PPE, all those kind of things. And we want to reiterate that we're utilizing those safety techniques and that we're offering alternatives for folks. I can tell you, particularly at the church, we have invested, I can't even tell you an exact number, but a lot of money on technology so that we can serve those that cannot or should not attend our services publicly. We did that likewise for our academy, for our Christian school, so that our kids can continue to learn. So we're investing those, but at the same time, as you said, it seems like our objective here ought to be to build the confidence so that people that can and the people that should can go ahead and begin to engage in the economy to help that, because if we don't, then those that have the means today, if this lingers on too much longer, they will not have the resources themselves either. And so in order for us to help those on the with the less resources, we've got to make sure that those with some resources are able to get things moving again. And that's kind of my perspective as we are looking at resolutions here.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. Debbie, do you want to go ahead and go?
I do. I was just going to, I think part of my thought process and listening to everyone was future presentations. And I think Mavita, Davin Lopez, they just did a consumer study for them to come talk. And then I think he has some access to some national, but he actually has some local information on the Mavita side for the consumer confidence. I also certainly agree with Doug in that we need to build consumer confidence. We might consider having a presentation from the health department. I've dug deep into all these numbers and the ratings and all that. So I think that might be of importance. And to Jolene's point, maybe a presentation from the nonprofit world on the services that they have been rendering to those that have needed it through this hard time and in the future, such as Casa de Peregrinos, the Community Foundation that have given out, and the city have given out hundreds of thousands of dollars. But where do we need to go in the future? That might be a good presentation. And then last but not least, I would like to see us do a presentation from maybe Tracy Bryan from the Bridge and her work and our work. Sharon and I both are on the Workforce Collaborative on the training piece. So that's kind of where I was thinking that we could go with some topics to have presentations in the future. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. I think those are some great points. Ms. Montgomery, you have your hand raised.
Hey, Brooke Montgomery for the record. I just really quickly on that feeling of being safe at church. I didn't see, I read over the documents that were attached. I didn't see baptism addressed. And so I just thought I would, water rituals, and it's beyond just Christianity, purification and shared water and baptism and full immersion baptism. I didn't know if that had been addressed so that people can feel safe as they are participating in baptism. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. All good points, everyone. I really do appreciate the conversation. Let me go ahead and start my video back. I think this is on the right track, but I do think we need to focus more on safe practices and how we're getting that across to the community. If anyone else has any ideas or any kind of things before I do want to share on my screen the New Mexico Restaurant Association's promise. Just because it's a one-pager, it's very, very simple. And it just shows what members of the Restaurant Association, which is kind of one of those things because it is a members organization that puts out and works on behalf of restaurants, but it's very, very similar to what we heard from Doug earlier. Or I'm sorry, what we heard from Paul earlier on the hospitality industry and what they are looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and share my, I'm not, okay, I am going to share my screen, sorry. I just need to accept that. Oh, never mind. I will not be sharing my screen because I need to restart my computer to do that. But I just wanted to kind of go over it. I did email it out and I will reshare it so that we can all look at it earlier. And it's just, it's a comfort level to express like you can feel comfortable and this is why. And I think those are things that we need to look at. Debbie I know that the Greater Chamber did put out a couple flyers. And did you share those with the group? I remember I got them personally from the chamber, but I don't know if you shared them to the board yet.
Debbie Moore for the record. I don't believe I shared it directly to the group, but I had gone through, I believe Griselda and Francisco both have. If you're talking about the 5 ways to open, I don't know if they sent that out originally, but I can certainly share it back with Griselda and then when they can get it back out to the group. But I thought they had shared it originally. We are now doing some videos to back that up. But yeah, we have that. And then Francisco, Griselda, help me out. Do you all still have that? I could resend it.
This is Francisco, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Debbie, let me search through my emails and I'll share it as I find them. Mr. Chair, if as you mentioned, this may be an ongoing topic for this group, would it be helpful for us to compile the document that you sent with the ones from the chamber and have them ready for discussion for next meeting?
Yes, ma'am. I think that would be best. Also, I know that Doug sent out some information if we can get that out to the group as well. And then I know if everyone else in the group, if they have any kind of safe practices and or best practices that they want to share, if we could do that as well. Ms. Martinez, I think that would be really beneficial to the group so we can all actively engage in that discussion topic maybe next week when we have our meeting.
We can do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Before we kind of move on to future discussion topics, does anyone else have anything that they wanted to share over the public confidence section? Mr. Harris.
Sure. So this is kind of segues into future discussion topics, but is there a question that I have, and maybe people from the city can answer, is does the city health department or the county health department have any ability to do enforcement of these things or to give a rating to businesses? Because that might help boost confidence. You know, you see the health department sticker in the window, and if it's red, you know, you have low confidence in that business. But you know, maybe you see a new sticker that's, hey, that these guys have actually been checked out and are complying. So a thought, question, topic for future discussion, maybe.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, the city of Las Cruces does not have a health department. It would be the county for that. And I'm not sure if Ms. Sharon Thomas has something to share. And I know that she has some close contact with the county, maybe to speak with regards to this, but correct, the city does not have a health department.
That is correct. And also, just to speak on my experience on that as well, is that the environment department, which is the state organization, only is over things that deal with food and beverage and public sanitation or health. So it wouldn't be like a office building or going to a park or anything like that would be excluded. So you'd actually be singling out quite a majority of businesses from being excluded from any kind of health rating, if you would, if that makes sense. Ms. Debbie Moore, you have your hand up.
Just to address, Michael, your question, I think part of the focus of the quote unquote certification program through the state was sort of to align with that it might help people feel safer in there. But to Chris's point, I mean, there's only so much, the environmental and the health department. Moving into the topics of discussion might be bringing in the county and emergency preparedness so that they can talk. I'm working real close with our other task force with Colin Combs, who's over both the city, county on the health and what's going on in that sort of safety thing. Michael, I don't know that there could be an enforcement, but I think the way we could push out and advertise and, you know, consider part of this group recommendations to the city is to really make certain a good percentage, if not 100% of our business have gone through that quote unquote certification program. And then they do have a little badge that you put in the window that they've done that if it's 100, you know. And I've also, and I think Chris, you all do it at Salud. Another thing of the safety piece is just the buy-in of the local business or the where they're going. Is I've encouraged people actually put your cleaning schedule or what you're doing up in writing so that your customers can see that. And if it's every 2 hours, have it documented. I mean, we've all seen them in the restrooms, but now we need to see them out. I saw something on Facebook yesterday. This area has been sanitized. So I think we need to encourage our businesses, everyone, to maybe incorporate just those little signs, you know, and that people can feel safer. And I also know a lot of businesses are getting their own mask imprinted with their, you know, marketing tool to give out so they feel safe. And then people actually, there you go. There's Chris has got his. So that, and I think those are the things, to Doug's point, to work together so that people feel safer, they feel comfortable. Even me, I mean, as much as I'm at home, I'm doing most of my calls, I still find myself anxious. So I think that confidence, but I think it's part of the responsibility is the churches, the hospitals, the medical facilities, and the businesses to actually advertise and market what they're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. I really do appreciate that. Mrs. Sharon Thomas, you have your hand raised, ma'am.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the enforcement question. So in terms of wearing masks, the county passed an ordinance that they were going to enforce it. The city did not. They just passed a resolution. a lot of concern about if somebody was cited, what the fine might be or days in jail. So they went with just suggesting that people wear masks. You can call in the city, you can call code enforcement if you see a big gathering, and people aren't doing social distancing and they don't have masks on. You can call and they will come and try to do something about that. But the idea that the city would go in and check out these businesses to see if what they're doing actually it supports the sticker they have on their window. I don't think that's been brought up to the city, and I don't know what the response would be to that, but that might be something to ask the council about. Some sort of city certification that people are following the promise.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Yes, Ms. Martinez.
So that's an interesting conversation because the only way that we could have to enforce something would be for it to become a piece of law through a regulation. And part of what Sherry mentioned, there was an extensive discussion behind the face covering in the form of an ordinance or a resolution. And I don't see, based on the discussion that I heard just on that one topic, not necessarily the overall safe practices for businesses, it will be a great confrontation with the public. And also it would be a big burden to, the only people who would be able to enforce it would be police. How, I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry, you froze for a second. I thought you were, I apologize.
Let me turn off my video. Maybe that makes it a little easier. But how New Mexico safe practice through the hospitality sector has been framed is to encourage people and invite them to participate in this and as a benefit from the business perspective to send a positive message to their customers. So the certificate, quote unquote, for that, right now it's only for hospitality related businesses. But as Debbie and others have mentioned, it would be really, I think what we need to do is create our own and make it a broad effort, including non-for-profits, as Ms. Martinez mentioned, and others that have customers and clients that would benefit on bringing a higher level of awareness and making sure that people are doing their own share. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I appreciate it. Mr. Cohen, you had your hand raised next. If you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to try to get a clarification. This board is not to try to implement some cumbersome regulatory actions from state entities. I thought our mission here was to help with economic recovery and to make recommendations to the city council to help businesses recover, not to, we have enough regulatory entities that are taking care of those issues. I thought we were looking more at the economic side of things.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I believe you're on the right track. Ms. Moore.
So just to follow up for the conversation about enforcement, et cetera, yes, it could be cumbersome. My preference would be, to get the city government and all the governments and all the agencies, let's get on a huge grassroots campaign about being safe in our city, that we're all together in this. Again, both the citizens and the business community, that we're all in this to make Las Cruces safe. Go back to the slogan we use at the chamber, Las Cruces strong. We're strong and we can do this. I mean, it's just a grassroots effort. Let's, perhaps it is, we're safe for putting, campaign type signs in our yards or our businesses. I don't know the answer to it, but I think, versus another cumbersome level of enforcement, I think we could sort of enforce ourselves. I mean, I think that's, peer pressure is a powerful tool even among adults. So I would like to see us just, encourage the city to somehow come up with a huge marketing campaign out of this safe promise, safe certification, however we can do it to involve the consumers.
I think you are on the right track, Ms. Moore. I think that is a great thing, you know, and just to kind of talk about that, when we had that earlier presentation from Paul, and he was talking about the safe promises, and when he did that presentation about getting back to travel, it's something that we can do within the city. Maybe even the Convention and Visitors Bureau can help out with that and talk about the best practices, and then create a very easy, small training session on best practices, safety, sanitation, and stuff like that within your personal business, your office space, going out to a park and stuff like that, that we can do some kind of program like that, because I think that would be really beneficial. And I think peer pressure is a great tool, and it makes people really pay attention. You know, your neighbor has a sign in their door that says that they passed, they did the certification for safe practices. Why don't I have one? I want one. Someone pointed it out, or a guest or a customer pointed it out. It's a really great tool. So I agree with that, because I really do think that this board is more about economic recovery, not putting burdens on the economy and the people wanting to go out in the economy. I think Mr. Miller had his hand up, and then Ms. Montgomery, and then go into Sharon. Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, just a real quick comment on that. I agree with the campaign. That's a wonderful idea about what we plan in marketing. But if you don't have a consistent buy-in from the community, all we need is one outbreak in the city, and it all goes down the drain. And so you got to be careful that you have the underpinning, the social compliance, I guess, or whatever you want to do, the safety features of it that are recommended by the health department. Otherwise we're just yeah, that's going to really kill any economic recovery if we have any type of outbreak here, especially in a business or a restaurant or something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Montgomery.
Thank you, Brooke Montgomery for the record. Moving forward, maybe defining when we want to recommend something to be a regulatory mandate, or if we're just suggesting to do something for the feeling of safety and to increase safety of our community. So if the New Mexico safety certification, it's not required, it's something that we're putting out there so we can better inform our clients, right? So that we can build this revenue, but it's not something that we're suggesting. I guess for future reference, I wasn't sure if we were suggesting that this be mandated, or if it's just something you can join and then put on your window to say, we do this, what they recommended.
To speak on that, and Ms. Martinez, if you want to jump in as well, I think this is not a regulatory board. This is more of a informational board, a brainstorming board to give recommendations to the city council and the mayor on best ways to invigorate and reopen the economy. As far as it goes with health department, environment department, and all sanitation and regulatory things that are provided by the state and by the governor, I think those are things that that are already implemented. I don't think we need to beat a dead horse with that. I think we need to be focusing on what we can do within Las Cruces to build the economy back, to bring it back, and to make people feel comfortable about going out. But as far as it goes with health, sanitation, and environment department, and all those things going on, it's already done in the state level, and I don't think it's our board's job or directive to start stepping on toes, if you will. Ms. Martinez, if you can please speak to that. Or
yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for that clarification, and thanks to everybody, because I mean, it's their thoughts that come to our mind, right? But as Mr. Chair mentioned, the purpose of this board is to advise mayor and city council on the reopening of the economy. And actually, Francisco sent an email earlier this morning because I think it's going to be really important for us to continue to remember the ultimate goal of this group. And actually, one of the items is how we're going to be able to report back to city council and mayor. And so I agree that these are concerns, but the goal is how do we bring the governor's office regulations or directive and implement that in a safe way that helps us have a quicker recovery and a safe reopening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez, for the clarification. Ms. Martinez, I believe you're up next, please.
Jolene Martinez, for the record. One of the things I don't want to confuse my statements about considering the most vulnerable populations as not being interested in economic business recovery. But I think, worker protections are a big part of consumer confidence. The same workers that are helping our businesses run, or those average wage earners or low wage earners, are the ones making many of these businesses run and also come back home to vulnerable situations. And so I think advising the city on maybe how they might support worker protections, like buying small businesses PPE or providing tax incentives for businesses who operate with safe practices. I mean, I think those are all ways to strategize how we protect workers and protect families, and also consider how businesses are able to do that for their employees. Because, I know for us in the nonprofit sector, some of our contracts have allowed us to pay differentials to workers who are most at risk, and be able to support that from this, having some kind of mechanism to support that from the city, or help incentivize, businesses who hire employees who are trained in safe practices, or reduction in maybe licensing fees or business permits or things like that, that allow them to operate in a way that's equitable for both workers and businesses, I think is something that this board might also want to consider.
Thank you for that, Ms. Martinez. I appreciate that, those comments. And also just for a clarification on that as well, as far as PPE gear goes, I know that the city has not necessarily taken that directive on, but the State Department of Health has, and you can contact them for PPE gear if you are unable to provide it to your team. They will help you with that. So I know that is something that they're offering. Ms. Thomas.
I just wanted to clarify. So we started out talking about a certification, and that's, am I understanding correctly, that's just something that's coming from the hospitality industry? Is that correct?
If you go to that website that that Paul was talking about, I believe it's more than just the hospitality. I believe there was a couple others on there, but mostly was focused at the tourism department, if you will. Paul, is that correct?
Yeah.
So, is that okay? So, so then part of the discussion, what I've heard today is people have talked about, we sort of circled around whether or not the city would do some kind of certification. There would be some kind of sticker that people could put up that came from the city, and that we would broaden that more than, like I think it was Jolene said, more than just the business, but to nonprofits and other groups. And so I think it might be important for us to decide if that's the way we want to go, some kind of certification, because then there's been a lot of discussion about what that would include and whether or not it would be enforced and all of those different issues. Not likely to be enforced by the city, but if it's part of a big campaign about what the city and all the businesses and nonprofits and workers within the city are trying to do, and different businesses and nonprofits can say, yes, I'm participating in this campaign, and I'm working with the city. So just to show that there's a broad coalition. So that's just my suggestion, because we keep circling around that. So maybe we want to focus in on that a little bit, whether or not that's something you want to do.
I think that's a great discussion topic maybe for the next time, is looking at something like that. But also with that in mind and kind of looking at that, that's totally an industry type standard in my realm, because it's going to be totally different to set a certification for a food and beverage hospitality where I'm dealing with food every day and people's safety coming into my four walls, where it is with maybe the nonprofit world, or where it is with health or anything like that. So I think we just need to kind of brainstorm and see if there's already certifications out there that the city could piggyback off of and say, for food and beverage or tourism, there is X, Y, and Z certification. I know that with the food handlers licensing going on and everything like that, they have changed already to include COVID best practices in food handlers certifications. And my team here at Salute we are making them redo all their food handler certifications before they are allowed to start back at Salute. And that's something that we're doing within our four walls, just because they have updated that since COVID. So it might be something that we can look at per industry and go from there.
I wasn't thinking about necessarily per industry, but just this broad campaign, you know, that I'm working with the city, I'm working with the city promise or whatever we call it, and then encourage businesses if they have guidelines from their particular type of business to put that certification up too. So that, but just to show that we are working together, and we are, you know, different businesses are looking at what works for different businesses, but just kind of this whole city working together issue.
So more of like a Las Cruces best practice promise type thing, where you just sign on, maybe you show your team a PowerPoint and you sign on the dotted line saying that you agree to the best practices type thing. Is that what we're looking at?
Well, yeah, that seems to me the way the discussion is going, that nobody wants to, we don't want to try to go out and tell people how to do things, but that we do want to have a big public information campaign and get out there and let people know that this discussion's going on, people are working on it, people are looking at their industry guidelines, and we're all keeping each other informed and working together.
Okay, perfect. And that kind of goes along with that whole peer pressure type campaign. I believe Paul, Francisco, and then we'll go over to Doug.
Yeah, so I just wanted Paul Dahlgren, marketing director for Visit Las Cruces, for the record. Just wanted to note that I think that was the idea behind NMHA sort of doing it for the entire state, would be that it has that sort of unifying effect for not just the city, but the actual entire state. And I know the promise is sort of that broad, it's a little bit more broad, and there's not necessarily strict accountability associated with it. And it sounds like the thing people would be interested in is that extra layer of accountability. And so I think the New Mexico Safe Certified program, since it just came out Monday, I know they're working with a couple of different organizations, in addition to the New Mexico Restaurant Association, the New Mexico Society of Association Executives. So they're working with a couple of different organizations. And I think the idea would be that that could be the thing that we could sort of piggyback on to offer that to businesses that were interested.
I think that in the messaging, this is Francisco Payares for the record. Debbie, I think the chairman needed to step out for a moment.
Got it.
And he's asking you to take over.
Okay.
One thing that I just wanted to mention is that we're running on the 30-minute mark over time. So we might actually start thinking about wrapping up and thinking of future discussion items, because we're getting close to that half an hour late. Thank you, Mrs. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Francisco. So I believe we have Mr. Cowan, you have your hand up real quick.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. I wanted to maybe reiterate two things with regards to these recommendations and trying to get folks to sign on. As Paul has already presented at the beginning of our meeting, that seems to already be in place, and I'm not sure we need to reinvent that wheel. We've already got an organization that has put together something that businesses can sign on to. Certainly something that we could recommend that it's available to businesses. I love your idea, Debbie, that we just come up with something where folks can voluntarily sign on, but not mandating anything. Again, just making recommendations for businesses so that they can say, look, we're part of this team. And I love the idea that we ought to have some kind of a slogan to the campaign. A couple of times, I think you said, we can do this. I think Chris's slogan at his restaurant is something like that, very similar to that. But if we came up with a catchy slogan that kind of helps people buy into this thought, and it's a positive thought, I think that would help folks start looking at some of the successes that we really want to start focusing in on.
Thank you. I see our chair's back, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick comment, Chris, before you wrap us up. I think certainly to all the comments that were said, those certification videos are in place. They are going to be making them for general business and other business, which I'm not saying we do the total videos, but what I'm saying is that perhaps we would consider, to Doug's point, of really identifying Las Cruces safe, or something that is very down to us. And it might be Las Cruces promise. I mean, we may just do this whole campaign both on the consumer side and the quote unquote business side. But I would recommend, Mr. Chair, that might be, since we're 30 minutes over for this time, is that we might take this, and I would be happy to research on other communities and get it with staff to forward out if there's some other communities that are doing some other things. But we have the foundation to build on. With that, Mr. Chair, that's my comment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind, perhaps we might want to move into the next discussion items so that we can wrap it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so wrapping up that one and going into future discussion. I know that we have had some conversations today that we might want to continue next week with more information and knowledge at our fingertips. I know Sharon Thomas is going to get some transportation leaders on the next week's call. So I think that we need to talk about transportation as next week's one of the discussion points. I think we need to continue the public confidence and maybe also talk about around what Debbie was saying about the Las Cruces promise, which sounds really, really catchy. So I think that needs to definitely be a discussion topic again. And then also open it up to the board if anyone else has any kind of discussion ideas that we need to look at. Anyone wants to raise their hand? Michael.
I had in my notes, Michael Harris for the record, that maybe a discussion on how businesses can leverage the PPP and EIDL loans, and getting that information out to the community would be a good economic related discussion topic for next time.
I think that's a great discussion topic. I don't know if either Francisco can jump on, because I know the city's done, along with the chamber, has done a lot of presentations with all those programming. I don't know if that's something that we've already talked about. Do you know, Francisco?
Mr. Chair, the city has put out, has echoed the message from our partners, but I think that the chamber has been also in a lot of regards pushing for these loans and doing webinars and things of that nature. And correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I think that the more educational portion of this might be much more attributable to the chamber in itself.
Okay. Debbie.
Yes, Michael, we are continuing to do, we just had another one, Debbie Moore, Greater Las Cruces Chamber for the record. We just did another one last week. We will continue to do more information, and then the city puts out our information. And we've had a lot of people. We've done about 12 seminars. on COVID and various things. About 6 of those have been related to PPP and EIDL. And we will probably do another one next Friday because EIDL's back open, and so as PPP still has some money. And so potentially we've done, we've probably saturated maybe 300 or 400 on the calls, and probably have touched about, I would say over 10,000 emails via that. I'm not sure the presentation to be this committee, but we could certainly work to have SBA or whatever to talk to this committee about what it involves. But I can also, Mr. Chair, Mr. Harris, send you some of the PowerPoints that we've received through our presentations to staff, and have staff send it out for that, just for informational purposes. I would be glad to share our materials that we have.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that. And I think that is probably something that we need to look at, is sending that out to the group. Personally, and the board can definitely echo and or comment, I have been on more WebExes and Zoom calls about these loan programs than I care to admit to, probably 20 plus in the last 3 months. So I know that information is readily out there. I don't know if that's something that we need to look at too in this committee right at this moment. And then also just to, Ms. Martinez did put out a question, and I think it is an important one. We do need to create a document to be sending to update the city council and the mayor. We will be working on that after this meeting to come up with that, to let them know what we are working on. But I am not sure when the final report date to the city is. Francisco, do you know if there is a final report date? I would guess until the economy is 100% open, but I don't know what that looks like.
Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. This is Francisco Payares for the record. At least in the guidance that we got from our city clerk was that the report could be kind of in a sequential manner to the city manager, and then the city manager can provide it to the mayor and the city council. If you want to have it in a month, sorry, in a weekly basis or bi-weekly, that's something that is workable. I think it depends, since this is such a specific type of board that is created to be extinguished once the full economy opens. It is important that there's constant communication about some of the suggestions or some of the findings, but that is completely up to the board. So it is up to you and the board members to decide on that.
Awesome, thank you for that clarification. And then the last question that Ms. Martinez had was splitting up into smaller work groups. I think after we get a couple more discussion topics, some definite hard focuses, we can definitely split up and do some research. I don't know, I think it needs to be in a public setting, so I'm not sure exactly what we can do in a small group, since it all has to be with the board and also with a quorum. So I'm not sure how that works, but we can definitely ask for some clarification on that.
Mr. Chair, this is Francisco Payares for the record. Yes, if it is, it could get into trouble with the Open Meetings Act. So if the discussion comes up on the board, perhaps it can be discussed here as one of the main topic items, and then the decision of the board, and it has to be on the public setting, correct?
That's what I figured. So it looks like we're all in this together, which is the slogan at Salute, actually. Mr. Cohen.
Yes, what I think that's important, somehow or another, if there's, I don't know what the regulations are, and I don't know what the governor's orders are with regards to being able to have a meeting where it's a live meeting. I'm not sure that there's anything that would build more confidence than for them to see that if we're able to come together for an important meeting on how to recover the economy, we can certainly go to a restaurant and eat. And so I think those things work very importantly together. Again, working within compliance of what the rules are, but I think that would be a huge plus.
Awesome, thank you for that comment, sir. Anyone else? sorry. Yes, Mr. Harris.
I wrote it in the chat, but I guess for the record, this is Michael Harris, and if we decide that that the city doesn't need to take some specific action on a topic, then that's probably also something, you know, to include in our findings, in addition to things that they do need to do.
Of course. And again, this is all going to be suggestions for action. But sorry, I'm at work. So with that being said, guys, I think we do need to get a motion on the table about the next discussion items. We are running into the second hour. So I know that we have a couple ideas on the floor. Like I said, transportation, we talked about last week, and I think it needs to be on the next one because that is an economic driver, especially in bringing people into Cruces from Hatch and Anthony and Sunland Park and all those great places. So Sherry Thomas did amazing work to get people to agree to come on the next meeting to talk to us about that. So I think that definitely needs to be a consideration. Another consideration needs to be the public confidence and looking at some kind of New Mexico or Las Cruces promise or something that we can enact within the Las Cruces that we can recommend to the city council and mayor as some kind of, not as a certificate of some sorts that you can put on your door saying, I agree to do X, Y, and Z, I think is very important. Ms. Martinez suggests workers, supports, and protections. That would actually probably be a pretty good one if we can get someone from Workforce Solutions on the call, maybe to go over some things for our workforce here that are currently unemployed and are being hindered by COVID. But if I can get some other recommendations and or a motion of what the next discussion items should be.
Okay, so I move that we next month or next week, is it next week?
Yes, we are meeting weekly.
My Zoom meetings are good. So Debbie Moore for the record, Greater Las Cruces Chamber of Commerce. I move that we have the topics of transportation and perhaps a continuation of the safe practices, the consumer confidence. And if time allows, I would like for us to see, to Jolene's comment about worker supports and protection, maybe we begin the conversation next week and move forward. That would be, that's a motion. There you go.
Thank you for that motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. So I have a motion and a second for those three discussion items, which will be transportation, safe practices, or the continuation of public confidence during COVID-19. We will be extending that. And then the third, if time permits, is workers support. And then we can look at getting, like I said, workforce solutions on this call. Any discussion? Hearing none. Can I hear?
Jolene Martinez, I motion to convene the meeting.
We just need to finish the discussion and making sure everyone's okay with it, and then we can get that going. Do I hear any Miss Sharon Thomas?
I just want to suggest what Debbie said, that at some point we asked Tracy Bryan to come and talk about the workforce programs that she's leading. So.
Thank you. Duly noted. Okay, so vote on the three discussion. Do I have any nays on the discussion items? And then all in favor, if you could please either type it in the, well, you have to say it out loud for Open Meetings Act. You can all just go around and please let me know. Ms.
Debbie
Martinez.
Moore, aye.
Thank you.
Michael Harris, aye.
George Miller, aye.
Thank you.
Doug Cowan, aye.
Sharon Thomas, aye.
Ron Fitzherbert, aye.
Ms. Montgomery.
Brooke Montgomery, aye.
Thank you.
Wayne Martinez, aye.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, motion does pass. Those will be our 3 discussion items for next week. And then we did have a motion for the adjournment by Ms. Martinez. And before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that we will be meeting via Zoom on the 25th at 10 a.m. again, with an hour-and-a-half meeting, as we are currently in 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.